We are going to get started. I'm Megan Houston. I'm the Resilience Director for Palm Beach County's Office of Resilience. We're a team of 3, and we work on climate change and sustainability issues. We're joined with our consultant team tonight, who is going to help us walk through some of the challenges and opportunities we're seeing in Palm Beach County related to climate change, related to risk and exposure, and opportunities to do something about that. So before I hand it over to Georgia, just thank you so much for all being here and sharing your time. Food, drinks, water, all of those are in the back. We do have recycling containers here for your paper and your cans. Our intern Ariel made the signs, so she would really appreciate if you participated and put your cans in the can spot and vice versa. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Georgia. I think the mic went out. Can you still hear it? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Georgia Vince. I'm with Tetra Tech, and we are supporting the county on their vulnerability assessment. And tonight's agenda, we'll do a brief team introductions. We'll talk about the project's background, the purpose of the project, and an overview, as well as a timeline to complete the project. We really are here tonight to hear from you all. We are interested in your input and your feedback on the vulnerability assessment, and we will also take questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So just for your information, there is a team of people working on this project, and that includes myself with Tetra Tech. Erin Deedy will be presenting this evening. She's a local planner and an attorney. Also supporting us here is Chen Moore Associates. They are a local engineering firm. Brazaga and S.A. Nelson are supporting our public outreach events. And Clearview Geographic is our GIS mapping and modeling subconsultant. I'm going to show you a quick video to get everyone on the same page about climate change and why we're really here.
As a result of the Industrial Revolution that kicked off in the mid-1700s, the Earth's surface is warming up at a never-seen-before rate. A major reason for the rise in temperatures is the increase in the concentration of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere. These cause our planet to retain heat from the sun. Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane are released into the atmosphere when fossil fuels are burned. Trees and oceans absorb carbon dioxide, but can't handle the large amounts that are now building up in the Earth's atmosphere. And because our forests are shrinking, even less carbon dioxide is absorbed. The high levels of carbon dioxide are already acidifying oceans, killing off coral reefs. It's also triggering a dangerous rise in sea levels and an increase in extreme weather events. Around the world and across Europe, innovators are now racing against the clock to invent new ways to live in our cities, use land, manufacture products, and run our businesses. New innovations are bringing down greenhouse gas emissions to confront climate change and its threat to our health and our economies, while creating new, sustainable growth and jobs.
So that was a little high-level overview, and let's bring it down to Florida and what's happening here locally in Palm Beach County. We all are experiencing the effects of climate change, and we've identified several threats that we'll be evaluating through this study, including flooding when an area becomes overwhelmed with too much water during heavy rainfall. Extreme heat. I think we all can relate to the extreme heat that we've been experiencing recently in Palm Beach County, when temperatures rise and remain significantly higher than normal over long periods of time. We also experience times of drought where there's prolonged periods of low rainfall. Severe storms. I think on the way here, I went through a rainfall event that was pretty extreme, with strong winds, hail, rainfall, extreme heavy rainfall and lightning. The hurricanes and tropical storms are becoming more severe and more powerful over time, and we've been exposed to several Category 5 hurricanes recently. And coastal erosion is the gradual wearing away of land along the coastlines caused by wind, waves, and currents. And that is also occurring across Palm Beach County's coastline. Wildfires spread rapidly and uncontrollably across landscapes, and we've been seeing wildfires around the country, Canada, Hawaii, and things of that nature. So we know that they are a significant threat. So what are we going to do about those threats? So we need to focus on our climate resiliency, and that includes adaptation, preparing for and adjusting to those climate changes, mitigation, which will help reduce or fix the cause of the climate change, and look forward to sustainable development to meet the community's growth needs and protect future generations. So climate threats constitute a range of risks that I was just speaking about, and we also need to look to the future. In the past, we've had 57 hurricanes pass within 125 miles of Palm Beach County, and our eroded shorelines are 35.3 miles of our 47 miles of coastline. So there are areas of increased risk which impact homes, human health, businesses, and the infrastructure. And Palm Beach County is working to proactively address these threats. I'm going to turn it over now to Erin Deedy to talk about the project background.
Good evening. My name is Erin Deedy. My office is in Delray Beach, and I was born and raised in Palm Beach Gardens Hospital. So I am about as local as you can get here in Palm Beach County. But I'm happy to be here representing the project team tonight. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what this project actually does, and some of the background and where we're heading with it. So obviously, as Georgia just mentioned, we're going to talk about a bunch of different climate threats. Has anybody been to the beach recently and tried to jump in the water for a very cool, refreshing, respite from the hot beach? The water is really warm, I can tell you. So we are seeing these impacts in lots and lots of different ways across Florida. So we are going to construct a plan, and we are going to use that plan to leverage better decision-making and hopefully funding for grants for projects through the state of Florida or through other resources to potentially have those projects take care of some of these issues that we're seeing, for instance, flooding and flood risk on our roads and in our stormwater systems. But what we really want to do is provide some type of planning process that has cohesion. It has collaboration across county departments and gets everybody kind of pulling in the same direction with the community in terms of the priorities for the various projects that we may want to implement in those funding sources. And if I can say one thing about this process, it's very intensive in terms of collecting information. So there's a lot of technical stuff that we have to look at in terms of doing our modeling and our mapping and generating the outputs, because we want the plan to be scientifically driven. We want it to be about information that we know about these threats and our infrastructure, and help us formulate what our priorities are. And so these are a lot of words that kind of go into that planning process, but we're going to assess. And if you can't collect data and create some kind of baseline, there's really no point in measuring what those future impacts may be. Prioritizing the various projects and hazard mitigation efforts, because what may be important to you in your neighborhood is maybe not so important to somebody else in another neighborhood. So we want to make sure that we're prioritizing our responses in an equitable way. And then we want to identify money potentially to pay for some of these projects. There are lots of different ways to do that. And then also understand the magnitude and severity. It's one thing if there's 3 inches of flooding on the road, but it's another thing if there's 8 inches of flooding on the road, there's 100 homeowners that live there, and there's a school at the end of the street. So we need to understand the implications of some of these risks. And then obviously we're trying to position the county to become eligible for various federal and state funding sources. And so we talked a little bit about this. This is kind of like the official list of tasks that we have to undertake. A lot of it we've kind of glossed over at this point, but there is going to be a lot of public involvement. There's going to be an ultimate planning document, or 2 planning documents actually, that are going to kind of help us with that future decision making. We're going to come back out to the public again for more input, and the process is only going to be as effective as much as we hear from you. So we would encourage you to stay engaged. And so risk is when we look at a neighborhood, or we look at a road or a drainage pump or something like that, and we understand what kind of climate stressor is going to pose on that piece of infrastructure or that neighborhood. Sensitivity is what kind of people are affected by that risk in that community. And like I said, it's the 100 homes in the school at the end of the street. That is a much more sensitive road to flooding than one where there's only 2 property owners there. And then what is our ability to respond? Do we have the ability to bounce back? Can we reduce damages? What can we do to actually fix that potential problem that we have? And what makes this climate assessment and action plan unique? Well, because we're using data from the local community, and that's really important. We're going to be modeling that information from county assets, county roads, local drainage structures, and really looking at what affects this county. It's not some high-level thing that includes evaluation of assets or community elements that we don't really care about. That's really important. And we get to define what those really high priority risks are. We know that, for instance, we have wildfires in Palm Beach County, but what's happened in Hawaii and what's happening in Canada right now has probably elevated how we think about those impacts in our communities. Like, it's not some far-fetched thing. Like, we really need to think about that, and we can identify what those hazards are that we look at. Looking at the hazards when they compound one another. What happens if you live on the coast and you get a hurricane followed by a really bad rainfall event? Does everybody remember what happened in April down in Broward, where we had so much rain? I was down at a conference in Miami and had to take the Brightline home because you couldn't drive. It was pretty crazy. And so what happens when we're looking at the compounding of those effects, or those really extreme ones? And then we will look at all of the assets that we think are really important. Is it roads? Is it wastewater? Is it our community parks? It could be our naturescapes and some of our green infrastructure that's really important too. And then again, I've talked about some of the public outreach that we'll be doing. And hopefully what we're doing is laying out for the county a blueprint where leadership will say, look, this is a priority. We want to put funding into it, and we want to mitigate and adapt to these impacts. Oops. So not too far. Okay, so the types of assets, we have a list that the state tells us that we have to look at. Transportation impacts are our roads, bridges, and again, we get to define what are those most important transportation systems. Our critical infrastructure, all our utilities, our water, wastewater, stormwater utilities, our critical buildings and facilities. For instance, schools or emergency operations centers, or just the fire station down the street, that we need to make sure that they have access in and out of that during flood events so they can serve the community. And then I did mention our natural, cultural, and historic resources. And that's something that's really important because we rely upon those resources to take our kids out to the park and have green space on the weekend. And we want to make sure that they're protected and available to us to do that in the future. So we also have certain requirements that the state tells us to evaluate. We have to look at the entire county, and we're looking at assets that are within cities that the county owns and maintains, because the whole point is that the county wants to know what's at risk that they are responsible for to keep maintaining in the future. We have to look at elevation data. How high are these facilities? Do we know how high a building is? Because we may have a site that floods and the building doesn't flood because it's elevated, but the parking lot and the roads leading to it are underwater. That's an important thing to understand. The state also requires us to look at certain sea level rise projections, which actually is a good thing because that way everybody in the state is looking at the same thing. And then we have to look at tidal flooding. Every October, we see the highest tides of the year, which floods some of the streets and some of the infrastructure in our downtowns and the cities. And then I talked a little bit about those compound events. Like it would be really bad to have a Fort Lauderdale like rain event in October. If you live east, you are going to be seeing a lot of flooding if that kind of event happens, or a hurricane in October, which is not so far-fetched anymore when we have the hurricane coming in at those highest high tides. Those would all be really important things to look at because they're not far-fetched scenarios. Those things actually do happen in reality. So we have to collect all of this data. We have to understand where all the assets are. We will be looking at other assets that are not owned and maintained by the county because they may be important, like a federal courthouse or a state agency building that people have to get to. We will model that and we will look at all different types of tools. There are different tools that we will use, and they're not some weird proprietary thing that you can't understand or have access to, and we'll be making that information available on the website and make it easy to understand for people. Everything's kind of looking down here. Okay. Our action implementation plan. So we will prioritize those options, prioritize projects, and get them ready to submit for future funding cycles and for decision making in terms of how we want to pay for them. And then we want obviously community input because we want to know what the assets are and what the projects are that are really important to the local community.
Thanks, Erin. So just to kind of wrap things up here, our key deliverables for the project will be the climate risk assessment that we're here to discuss tonight. We have 2 planning grants that were provided to support that effort, and that will look at the exposure and sensitivity and summarize the risks identified. We'll have a risk action plan to identify the threats and the adaptation strategies to those threats for a countywide action plan. We'll have GIS mapping and a tool such as a data dashboard so that everyone can have access and visualize the flooding and sea level rise impacts and make those maps available to the public. We'll also be prioritizing the project list. So we will probably identify a lot of projects through this process. But we want to make sure that the projects we identify are cost effective and make sure that the solutions are practical. And then we want to, of course, make sure they're addressing the risks that we've identified. So once we identify all the strategies, we'll provide a timeline and cost estimate for those projects and consider social equity. So the key takeaways for tonight is that Palm Beach County will be affected by climate threats, and there are areas in the county of increased risks. So Palm Beach County has been proactively addressing climate change to further reduce the risks and align the resources that we need with the needs of the communities. And that means finding additional funding and implementing projects that are prioritized. Here's our project timeline. We will be working towards drafting the climate risk assessment, and then we will be having we talked several times about additional public meetings and collecting public input. And then next year we'll be working on the climate risk action plan and pulling together the projects and the costs and the schedule for those projects. The end goal is December 2025 to have the final vulnerability assessment and resiliency action plan for the county and with the community presentation. So we definitely want your feedback. The county has an online survey. You can take it with your phone. There's little QR codes at the front desk. We also have posters around the room that you can, we'll be manning, we'll have someone stationed at each poster to walk you through the posters where you can provide input there. We have, if you don't want to use your phone, you can do the survey on the iPad, or we have paper surveys in the back. So we really want to collect your input today. Of course, we'll take comments and questions after the presentation, but we really want to make this as interactive as possible and make sure that you all are heard today. We also have comment cards in the back of the room. If you don't feel like asking a question today and you just want to leave us a question, we can answer those as well. And then there's a project website. It's listed here on the screen, but if you just Google Palm Beach County Vulnerability Assessment or Resiliency, you'll be able to find the website. So with that, we will take any questions or comments at this time. Hold on. Let me get you.
Are you coordinating this planning effort with, and a lot of coastal municipalities are also doing studies on sea level rise and the like. Is there any coordination with this plan with some of those coastal communities?
Yes, the answer is simply yes. We are coordinating with the local municipalities along the coast and the western communities in Palm Beach County. We're also coordinating with South Florida Water Management District. And then, of course, all the data that we collect will be coordinated through the DEP Flood Hub and other the DEP's resiliency program.
So the ultimate plans could be very wide and varied, right? I mean, I'm kind of.
Yep. The ultimate plan will be like a roadmap where we'll have projects, the list of projects to get the county to be more resilient over time. We'll have costs associated with those projects. We'll have a timeline for implementation. And so at the end of the day, years down the road, as the time 2040 comes upon us, hopefully the county will be ready for any increased in sea level rise or other climate threats that we may be facing at the time.
You know, if the other kind like Broward or
they're all doing it. Yes, the state of Florida's resiliency program is statewide. Even inland counties are doing vulnerability assessments for climate change. So the state is offering planning grants to the local governments and to the counties to develop these vulnerability assessments, which will all go into a statewide resiliency plan. And that plan is those projects in that plan is what the state will then provide 50% cost match for funding.
Thank you.
Erica, we're going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I am actually here as part to the Environmental Caucus of Palm Beach County. I wanted to ask a question in respects to our alignments as a county. Do we have a stance against fossil fuel contracts and new infrastructure projects that are both subsidized by our county as well as are uniformly agreed with by our county or affiliated with, funded by? And have we taken any legacy stances against these industries within the county historically?
Hi, Erica. Thank you for the question. This is Megan Houston with the Office of Resilience. We as a county are looking at how to include net zero energy opportunities in this resilience action plan. So looking at ways to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We also have county capital planning processes right now. So every county capital construction project has to include resiliency and sustainability in the planning process. And as part of that, we're asking, what are you doing above and beyond code on energy efficiency? How are you including renewable energy panel, things like that into your building projects? So we're taking a hard look at how we are going through those processes. That's how we're addressing it right now. And then with our net zero kind of menu of options that the team will be helping us look at, it's going to allow us to look at costs and benefits of going further and doing more deep engagement on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We pay $30 million every year as a county for just our light bill. So we are always looking at ways that we can reduce those costs.
That's wonderful, and I really appreciate the thorough answer. Thank you. I was making also a statement on how we can best together create new systems of understanding how the industries of fossil fuels also impact our infrastructural adaptations as climate change evolves, and what we can do to attack the root cause of racial capitalism, and take a jab at what ultimately is also our budget that continues to fund projects, even in spaces that we don't anticipate them to be connected and hold, lobbied underbellies. So I'm hoping we can start to look at those areas of concern and involve the minds that are willing to do the researches and break apart those things so we can create plans which capitulate our understanding of the environment and the severity of our cost on it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody here in the audience have any questions? Another online question.
Mary Jo, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, Mary Jo, we will come back to you later.
I mean, we can turn it over to the posters, but I think it would be helpful too. I mean, you came in, you wanted to participate in the workshop. Is anything on your minds that we haven't addressed that you're concerned about, or does this kind of resonate? Does this bring up any feelings about your community that you want to discuss? So we're here for you. And if you have any questions or comments about things we're talking about, feel free to raise your hand and offer that feedback as well. So any kind of maybe show of hands, anyone deal with flooding yet that blocked their ability to get home or get to school? Anyone ever deal with flooded roads? Yeah. Okay. Anyone take transit? Anyone take Palm Tran? No. Okay. Hey, we got one in the back. Anyone? Let's see. Does anyone feel like it's getting hotter over the summers? Anyone outside from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.? Or do we try to find the library or air conditioning? I mean, those are kinds of things that we're seeing, and that's why we're trying to figure out how to plan for the future in Palm Beach County, right? Like Aaron was saying, jumping into the ocean, it's not refreshing. What is that? That's strange. So those kinds of, we can't control the ocean, but we can do our part to reduce how warm that ocean might get. And then we can try to adapt and change things as we build. So we have questions. Do we want to maybe turn it over to well, first I'll pause because I just rambled. Anything? Safe space. Okay. Maybe we can read some of the prompts from the posters.
So we'll start on this one. Which tools would be most beneficial for you to stay informed about Palm Beach County's climate resiliency planning and policies? So if you all would like to come up, we have little dots that you can choose, but just to let you know, the options are technical reports, dedicated website, newsletter, public workshops, or other. Would you like to? Want to come on up?
Yeah.
Read them all? Okay. Question number 2. What tools would be most helpful to you to make informed decisions about climate risks to your home or business? Question 3. Which of the following climate change impacts are you aware of? Question 4. Which strategies do you want Palm Beach County to do more of by 2050 to address future flooding risks? Which of the following climate change impacts are you aware of? We give you plenty of options. And the last question, which strategies do you want Palm Beach County to do more of by 2050 to address future flooding risks? So I guess we have 2 of each. So if you all would like to come up, we have little dots for you and you can go ahead and provide us with some answers.
Thank you. And we also have, again, if you want to scan the QR code at the front desk where you signed in, you can take the online survey. It also includes a map so we can know your location and you can identify areas of concern on that map. Please make sure you help yourself to refreshments and food and recycle, of course, every day. I hope you're all recycling. So thank you all for attending today.
And we do have one more
we have-
online question
okay,
here
great.
from Hillary Keys. She asks, have we looked at ending the sugarcane burning in addition to eliminating the public health threat caused by pre-harvest sugar field burning? The alternative of green harvesting can help mitigate climate change.
Yeah, thank you for your question. However, that question is kind of outside the bounds of this particular study. Any other questions online?
Yes, I think we have a couple more. Barbara, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, I thank you. I wanted to know if, as part of the data that you will be collecting or the focus of your of the action plan, and maybe you mentioned it and I just missed it, includes food security and water issues. Food security, I mean, Palm Beach County has such an important agricultural sector. And then, you know, the water issues that we've had. Is that part of the study as well?
Well, so thank you for your question. As far as water, I think you're talking about water supply, and we will be evaluating the assets that are responsible for water supply to the counties. There are other entities that are responsible for managing the water supply outside of Palm Beach County itself. So, but we will be looking at the county's assets related to water supply. And then as far as food production, we'll be looking at threats to the Western communities, and there will likely be some evaluation of threats to the ag communities out west.
Thank you.
And one follow-up, Barbara, on that question about food security. It is something that the Office of Resilience is looking into on how we can partner with our community-based organizations and our co-op extension and our community services departments on how we can align and support food security through increasing sustainable agricultural areas and putting tree canopy that might have fruit-bearing trees and things like that. So it is something that we're starting to enter into.
Okay, Gary, and if I do have a follow-up, if I may, and I have a feeling maybe this is not part of your scope, but what about development as we see the increased risks of climate change in the county? Will you be looking at, when we talk about resiliency, where maybe we shouldn't be developing and more green spaces? Is that part of the scope of what you'll be looking at, of recommendations? Maybe we shouldn't be developing further in certain areas.
So the study will have an evaluation of existing county codes to see where codes can be updated to ensure a more resilient community.
Okay, so that means you will be looking at where to develop commercially, where to develop or not, more housing, and things of that nature through codes.
Hi, Barbara. This is Erin Dady. I was speaking earlier in the presentation. Like, it's not part of this study to dictate like land use categories throughout the county, like develop more here, don't develop more there. But two things. One, there's redevelopment that's occurring with our communities, and we can recommend policies to make sure that that redevelopment is commensurate with the risk in that particular area. So that's one thing that we can potentially do. The second thing that we can do is absolutely identify those areas of the community that are more at risk. Obviously, we know along the coast that we have sea level rise, tidal flooding, storm surge, hurricane risk, that type of thing. Inland, we have a lot of risk too. When we have high volume rain events, it's a different type of risk. And by identifying that risk and saying these are areas where the infrastructure may not have the right capacity to support development, those are very important conclusions that we would be making as part of this study. But it's really not our role to be dictating, the overall land use plan of the county.
I understand the distinction, but I really appreciate the response. That's great. Yeah, you'll be looking at all those risks. Thank you.
All right, we have one more question from Mary Jo. Mary Jo, I'm going to allow you to talk now. Please go ahead and ask your question. Mary Jo, you've got to unmute yourself to ask your question, please.
And my question is concerning what is going to be happening between now and 1925 on addressing polycrises, which, according to the United Nations and other scientific organizations, are going to be more frequent, especially here in the kind of climate that we have here. There is a movement afoot now to establish resilience hubs around the country, and I'm wondering if the county is planning to experiment with resilience hubs and having them operating 24/7, 365 days a year instead of waiting for an emergency to occur. Thank you.
Great question on resilience hubs. That is something we've looked into. Sometimes other states and local examples show they're more of a community organization, a community center that becomes a community asset and increases their scope to become a resilience hubs often, or it could also be something like a library that offers resources and has shelter and things like that. So it could be a recommendation from this report on how Palm Beach County should be thinking specifically about resilience hubs. We do, for example, post heat warnings and things like that and encourage people to use our facilities and take shade in cool parks and come to our libraries. We put out advisories like that and press releases in the last few weeks specifically. So it is something we're looking into. I'm not aware of any 24/7 kind of facility, but we are looking at how we can use resilience hubs as an asset.
Yeah. And I think there was one more question out here in the audience somewhere.
So, hello. I wanted to know, considering that Florida is a huge agricultural state, especially in like sugarcane, I know that involves a lot of crop burning, and that's probably, contributing to like the environmental and like the carbon emissions. Is there any type of, I guess, collaborations that you guys are doing to combat that as well, as far as it contributing to what, the environmental issue?
Yeah, I did answer a similar question before that is outside the scope of this report. However, as Megan mentioned, she is working, the Office of Resiliency is working with the ag community to collaborate and work through some to see how they can work together for different aspects.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we're going to go ahead and close the recording, and thank you, everyone.